Hi guys, Anthony here. Just wanted to do a quick little video, basically on some Star Wars Legion points. Not literal army list building points, but more like pointers. And again, not pointers like tactics, just interesting points that I'd like to discuss about the game. That took a long time to get to. Anyways, the reason I wanted to do a little video here is A, because I had time in my ever busy schedule, and B, because I have a few more games under my belt now, from everything from 400 to 500 to 800 points on 3x3 tables, on 6x3 tables, with all different kinds of terrain, stretching from, building ruins and trees and barricades to actual inside of buildings and structures, and rivers and things like this. So I wanted to talk a little bit about terrain. Actually, that's one of my points. And the other thing I want to talk about is just, my experience doing some list building and experimenting with different types of units. Insofar as our very first release wave, I mean the General Veers and snow troopers or environment troopers, as well as fleet troopers and Leia. We know that they're announced. We know quite a bit about those yet to be released units, but they're not released yet. There's been no play experience with them. So for all intents and purposes of my talk today, I'm just going to pretend they don't exist. I'm just going to ignore them. But yes, I have had lots of time to play. Pretty much exclusively as Imperials. I played one game as Rebels just for fun, but my main army is Imperials, and I do have a decent 800 point list that I can run with them because I have the in my possession the equivalent of 2 Imperial starter boxes, as well as 1 Stormtrooper expansion, 1 Bike expansion, and 1 ATST expansion. So basically I kind of have a little bit of everything with a couple duplicates because of my other starter set. So let's talk about terrain first. That was the first thing I brought up. Terrain is fine. Terrain's important. Terrain's pretty. Terrain is tactical. Terrain is very important in a tabletop war game. The issue that people have been coming up with, and I've seen it online. I know a couple, not many, but I think a couple other videos that you'll find on YouTube will talk about it. But before we read about it online, my actual gaming community encountered this, especially with units like the AT-AT and the Rebel Airspeeder, which have such height to them, either because they're monstrous walkers or because they're flyers, even though flyers isn't a rule, but it's a flying ship, it's a craft. And the idea was that by the way the rules stated it, determining if a model has cover means drawing a line from the one base to the target base, and if that line crosses through a piece of terrain, then that unit will receive some kind of cover, whether it be light or heavy or whatever. Now here's where the problem comes in, is that when you're dealing with units like ATs, or units on an elevated position, or airspeeders flying through the sky, should that really always apply just as black and white? It's kind of silly. I mean, if you have a unit here and it's behind a barricade or something, or there's something in between, and you have an ATST, I might have said AT-AT earlier, we can dream. If you have an ATST, that thing is not ground level. Like, its gun emplacement and the height of the model is like up here. And it just doesn't make sense in your mind why something would gain cover when it's essentially lobbing shots over whatever's giving its cover. Or if there's a unit here and a barricade here in your ATST, I mean, yes, the base will technically draw through that barricade, or maybe that short building, but it also states in the rules that line of sight is determined from the highest point of the model centered over the base. So, I mean, for all intents and purposes, and I know that there's been a few kind of oddities like this come out lately, and I'm very sure that Fantasy Flight's going to update their organic rules reference guide PDF online, probably within the next couple weeks. I'd be surprised if it took longer than that. And just rectify this. I know that we've kind of come to a conclusion in my community that we're going to kind of house rule it so that cover is determined not just by this whole base-to-base mechanic of line of sight, but more so take that line of sight where you're determining line of sight from at the topmost point of the model and say to yourself, looking from here, true line of sight from there to the target, is the target obscured in a way that would grant cover? And if the answer is yes, then your second question is, what is obscuring it? And then that'll help you determine whether it is light or heavy cover. I think that to me, that is the fairest, best, most realistic, without getting overly complicated way of handling that rule and that question. Um, because otherwise, you just run into some really silly situations that, aside from not being very intuitive as a rule, this is the big one for me, is that it takes you out of the game. It breaks the immersion, it breaks the thematicness of it, and there are lots of rules that I can swallow and say, yeah, that's not 100% realistic as to what would happen, but it does make for a smoother, cleaner game. You don't have to think about it a whole lot, but it's still tactical. But a rule like this, it just sucks you out of the game. It's like, well, I don't get it. Like, I can see you very clearly. Why is this getting cover? It doesn't make any sense. So that, to me, takes you out of the experience, and that is a detriment. I'm not someone who's always going to value reality simulation over rules, because I think that oftentimes you'll stub your toe with that. It's better to have a good rule set than a 100% realistic rule set. But I do think that there are times where the realistic simulation of the scenario needs to be taken into account, or it just pulls you out of the game and makes it not as an enjoyable experience, because you're like, my brain doesn't reconcile what you're telling me to do with what I think should happen, which I know is a bit of an odd thing to say, because we can't always have what we want, but I think that most people can agree in this case that something should be done about that. So that's how we're going to handle it in our community here in North Bay, at North Bay Games and Hobbies. That's how we're I think, going to play it. Especially, we have our first tournament coming up this Saturday, which is very exciting. We're basically copying the format that they did at Adepticon to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to play. And looks like it's going to be really fun. I think we're clocking in so far at about 10 players or so, doing for the 500 points with some different restrictions. It's going to be a lot of fun. We've been really cranking out terrain, which is part of why this has come up. We've been really cranking out terrain over the last couple weeks. You may have, if you kind of follow North Bay Games and Hobbies on Facebook, which I encourage you to do. We have some cool stuff up sometimes, most of the time. But we did like a Yavin theme table where we actually made one of the Yavin temples, and apparently by we I mean my dad, who is kind of like the terrain guru right now. He's working to crank out a 6x3 Jakku table for the tournament this Saturday. So we'll see if that materializes. I've doubted before, and he's proved me wrong every single time. He did the crate table for us. He did the Yavin temple for us to kind of really, because what's Yavin without the temple? It's a forest world. You couldn't tell it apart, just from anything else. But once you put that temple on there, and the top of the temple was removable, so guys could go inside and claim objectives that were placed in there, and it's 3 feet wide on the dot, so it creates a great kind of cork at the end of your table without taking away play space. Amazing. It was really, really cool. And we have another local community member who has put some time into making some really nice kind of, it could be Tatooine, but it definitely has more of a Jeddah feeling to it, of those kind of sandy, buildings and towers and garages. So he's been putting some time in there, and they're looking great. So we're going to have some really cool themed tables for Saturday too, but whatever, I'm kind of going off on a tangent. The other piece that I wanted to talk about was just my experience now playing the Imperials. And I have 2 distinct experiences playing the Imperials. One of them is Imperial versus Rebel, and one of them is Imperial versus Imperial, which I've only done a couple times, but can I tell you that you really have to do things differently depending on the person not even the person, sorry, but the faction that you're playing against. So what do I mean by that? Well, Imperials versus Rebels, I think I really have a good understanding of how the Rebels work and how I should be playing against them at this point in time. So far, especially because we've been practicing a lot of 500-point games to prep for this little tournament that we've got coming up. I have played one 800-point game. It was a load of fun. I think I prefer that realistically to any smaller game. But what I will say is, number one, when you play on a 3x3 with this game, it's brutal. The entire board is a kill box. I mean, when you think about it, you have a 3-foot-long board, and each team is deploying 6 inches up, because you deploy range 1, and range 1 of a ruler is 6 inches. So you're deploying 6 inches up, which means there's only 24 inches between the two of you, and you shoot 18 inches with almost everything. So in turn 1, you can be shooting the enemy. So terrain becomes hugely important. See part 1 of our discussion. But so playing on a 3x3 is absolutely brutal. And the other thing is that because we're still, it's not just like wipe your opponent, because again it's a kill box. Things die so fast in this game without cover. Especially if you're unlucky with your defense die rolls, and the opponent happens to be lucky with their offensive rolls. You can really just, like, an entire squad can get vaped in 1 or 2 rounds of shooting. And when you're only really bringing 4 or 5 squads to the table, that's a significant reduction in activations and firepower and all kinds of stuff. So it's not just a wipe your opponent from the map. We're still doing objective-based play. And so my favorite thing to run so far, in all honesty, has just been like Vader as my commander. Obviously, he's the only one we've got. And then 3 completely kitted out units of stormtroopers. And by that, what I should say is they're not completely kitted out. I actually didn't give them grenades, but it's 3 squads of stormtroopers, 2 with DTLs, 1 with the HH-9 rocket launcher, or maybe it's 99, I can't remember. And that's all 3 of them have weapon upgrades. All 3 of them have targeting scopes, because as an Imperial player, I've been in that position enough times where you throw your dice and like 5 of your whites come up blank. And it's like, great, well, with my scopes and being stormtroopers with my precise 1, I get to reroll 4 of my dice now. And even if you only get 1 or 2 other hits, maybe those are the 2 hits that can soak the heavy cover so the rest of your hits can actually go through. I don't know. But I put the scopes on there, especially because scopes are 6 points apiece. And, if I didn't take those scopes, I would literally have a point bid of 18, which is just excessive at 500 points, especially when most players are just learning how to play. So I didn't want to do that. So I said, yep, throw scopes on them, get the extra rerolls if I need them. And then, of course, every squad is upgraded with an extra man. So 3 squads of 6 stormtroopers with scopes and heavy weapons, and then Darth Vader. And I've got Darth Vader tooled up with force push, because I love being able to drag things away from objectives or out of cover or into melee range or into, whatever, because you can get that free move and attack, or that move and then a free attack with Vader. Sometimes you just need that extra get over, Scorpion style, get over here, and the whole squad comes closer, and then you move and get to just slash away. So force push is great. Force reflexes I like, because I also give him saber throw. With his max range being 2, there's a lot of time that Vader is just spending walking up the board and threatening areas and that kind of thing. The ability to get a free dodge and then always be able to untap that with his Master of the Force ability at the end of the round basically means that wherever he goes, Vader's got a free dodge token, which makes him extremely uncomfortable to shoot at, because if you're moving him wisely, he's going to have probably minimum light cover and then a dodge token, which means that now 2 of your hits on him just disappear. And then on top of that, he gets to convert his surges into shields when he's rolling his red defense dice. And then on top of that, every time he does that, he's causing a wound to you, no saving allowed. So it makes him a really nasty target to shoot at unless you're really committed and you just pour everything at him. But like I said earlier, you want to be moving him up smart, which is something that took me a little bit of a while to learn. Don't be so brazen with him. He's powerful, but he can still be shot down like anyone else. So that's basically my list. Vader with 3 force powers and 3 kind of fat troops of stormtroopers. And the reason I like it is because with that, I have basically 4 squad leaders, because remember that Vader is a trooper, and because he's a squad of 1, he counts as his own squad leader, which means he's capable of capturing objectives and all that kind of good stuff. So with all this objective-based play, you have 4 ways to score now. You can cover a lot of ground. You can pour out a lot of fire. Everything has red defense dice. And after that, it just comes down to your tactics of which command card you play when, and how you are strategically moving your guys up the board, the order of activation, all the good stuff that makes the game a great tactical play. But that's what I like so far. So playing against other Imperials has actually been the harder part for me, is learning, the frustration that my opponents that are rebels must have, where it is, wow, stormtroopers in heavy cover are gross to get rid of, especially when Vader's around, because they will never panic. They can be suppressed, and you can take them down to 1 action, and maybe they don't rally that away by the next turn or something, but it's not going to stop. We played a game. I had a unit of stormtroopers inside of basically a speeder garage, and they were just overwatching this river that the rebels were on the other side of, and they had 3-4 suppression markers on them. But Vader being within 3 means they can use his leadership value of fearless. So they don't panic at all. They're more afraid of Vader getting, you know, angry with them than running away from Rebel blasters. They're just terrorists anyways, right? Am I right? But the thing is so they're suppressed. They lose one of their actions, so they just fire. But that is still 5 white dice and 2 black dice with impact 1 and 4 rerolls. Or sorry, no rerolls because there's no aim action. But that's still a lot of dice being thrown at you. And if you get a good roll, you know, that's pretty good. And if you don't get a good roll, even if you just get one, again, you're still tossing out suppression markers. You're locking down a location. And when the time comes, you might be in the position to start moving up the field, as I did in that game because the game type was breakthrough. So, you know, stormtroopers in cover are pretty useful, especially when Vader's around. For me, though, the difficulty is dealing with the other Vader. I don't think in my past couple games I've given him enough attention. And if he takes out your Vader, then you're in trouble because now there's nothing really to stop that enemy Vader from getting into distance of your troopers to either just slice them into pieces or use that Master of Evil card and cause your stormtroopers just to run. And again, in a play area that small, it's not out of the question that 1 or 2 could just run off a table edge, even that activation, right? Especially if you don't roll well on those white rally dice, which is, they're white, they're very hard to roll on. You have like a 1/3 of a chance to get rid of one, or per dice, I should say, to get rid of a token. So it's very possible that it gets nasty once Vader's lurking around in your back ranks. Especially if you've given him something like Force Choke, because then it's like no matter what else happens, he's just often a dude no matter what. So he's really going to kind of war of attrition you into the ground. Now against Rebels, what I've found is that Rebel stuff is so much cheaper that it's about rock, paper, scissoring them, I guess you'd say. And again, this is why I like having those 3 Stormtrooper squads, is that they are extremely flexible, especially when you're like, two heavy blasters, you know, the DTLs, but that rocket launcher for that key time when you need those 3 black dice with impact 3, that makes your opponent second guess with his airspeeder and his ATRTs. Plus Vader's walking around, he's throwing his lightsaber, and if it's not in cover, that's going to be just basically, as long as you roll 3 hits, that's 3 damage. That's a half-dead ATRT. That's rounding down a half-dead airspeeder as well, because that Pierce 3, your shields don't matter. But then again, now that I think of it, the airspeeder automatically comes with cover 1 all the time, so I guess you can at most do 2 there. But still, I mean, that's why you're not really going to waste your time throwing Vader at an airspeeder, right? But the bottom line is, you know, you have every single thing in your army has impact of some variety, so it makes you very able to deal with things. Because the Rebels, what I hate is the rotary guns. I really do, especially in these smaller games. They run a risk taking the rotary gun in bigger games if they've only got 1 or 2 of them, because the ATST doesn't care about, right? It has armor too. You need crits, and the rotary cannon has no impact. But again, these smaller games, especially against troops, oh my god, a thing running around, you know, at speed 2 with armor and I think 5 black dice, that's a whole other squad of rebels, basically, right? So that's pretty good. So that's why it's important to take one of those rocket launchers, just to say, this is the rock, paper, scissor element. It's like, there's your priority target. Your job now is to go and kill that thing. And if you need help, then squads can be sent to support you, but your mission is to kill that. And even if you don't kill it, your secondary objective is to make it waste so much time tiptoeing around you that you're taking it out of the game for, you know, half of the game or whatever, until the impact that it's going to make on the game is so minimal that it's like, good job, you know, whether you killed it or wasted its time, either way, mission accomplished. So, you know, there is definitely that element. So that's kind of been my experience playing at the lower 500 point setting. You know, for me, it's all about the troops at that point. It's all about order of activation and that kind of thing. But now I want to talk just briefly, and I know I'm getting a bit lengthy here, so I'm going to sum it up with this, is I did get a chance to play one 800-point game. It was Empire versus Rebels. It was a ton of fun. We played key positions, where, you know, 3 pieces of terrain are your objective markers, and you capture it by having squad leaders inside of those terrain features. And we also played rapid reinforcement. And so my list was 4 squads of stormtroopers, kitted out very heavily. I think one of them didn't have a weapons team of some kind just because of points. I also took Vader with the same force power layout that I just described. And then I also took, I believe, a squad of 2 bikes with no upgrades and an ATST that was upgraded with, and I always forget the name of it, but basically the side turret, like that gives you an extra 1 of each color of dice. So that's range 1 to 3. I threw that on it, and I threw the concussion grenade launcher. Now, I didn't take Weiss, which some people might look at me cockeyed and be like, well, why would you throw 3 weapons on it if you can only fire 2? And the answer, again, for the same reason as I like the Stormtroopers, is flexibility. And it worked out perfectly in the game. The ATST positions itself, and it says if there's something within range to 3 that I really need to focus fire on, then the 2 weapons I will fire will be at the same target, and I'll be throwing 3 white, 3 red, 3 black, impact 3. It's going to be phenomenal, right? Now, alternatively, if you're like, well, that over there is not in cover, this here is in cover, I want to spread my suppression, you can say target 1 will be the main cannon over here. That's where my impact 3 is going to be. Maybe it's armor, maybe it's something out of cover. The grenade launcher is only throwing 2 black dice, but it ignores cover. So those rebels in those stony ruins over there, I'm throwing 2 black dice at them to get suppression and to basically probably kill 2. Which is a big deal when your max squad size is 6. That's a third of your squad gone with 1 attack, you know, assuming rolls work out in your favor. But my experience using that ATST was that, yes, it puts out a lot of fire, and yes, it has a lot of health, but it's true, where it truly shines is psychological warfare, because your opponent sees this towering, scary thing with all this health, immune to everything but crits, with all that firepower. You know what they do is they say, I need to kill that. And so they send the airspeeder after it. And so they send ATRTs after it. And every time they do that, you know what they're not doing is they're not focusing on your stormtroopers, who also have impact, who also have a ton of firepower, who have red defensive dice. And more importantly, the ATST, it serves one purpose. Well, 2 purposes, I guess. It soaks fire, and it gives out fire. You know what it doesn't do? Is it doesn't capture objectives. So they can spend half the game killing your ATST if they want, and hopefully you're smart enough to, you know, not give them a rear shot for that weak point. Hopefully you're smart enough to try and keep it in cover, like, you know, behind woods or in the woods or something like that. But you know, bottom line is it's probably going to take them 3 turns to kill the bloody thing if they're lucky. And that's 3 turns that your guys who can actually win the game are not being shot at, are not being hampered, and who can focus their fire on all the things that are a danger to your ATST. You know, so that's how it worked out for me, and I very much enjoyed that. I'm not saying that, you know, it is OP or that it is, you know, a thing that the Rebels have nothing to deal with it, whatever. You know, it's a very balanced game. I have just personally found that as an Imperial player, the ATST is really useful insofar as another source of panic for the enemy that they can't really ignore, but that when they do put their focus fire onto it, it's allowing you to get things done with your units whose job is to get things done. So that's, I really enjoyed that aspect and learning about it. But I mean, again, just like anything else, just like Vader, for example, and this is what I love about this game, is the ATST is powerful and the ATST can soak damage, but it, you know, it'll die. It'll probably die every single game, to be honest with you. And that doesn't mean it's not good. It just means that it's doing its job. And don't go into a game thinking this is my invincible unit and this is my unit that I'm going to use to win the game and that kind of thing. No, it's just another cog in the system. And if you appropriately play that cog in synchrony with your commander and your troopers and whatever, it'll be fantastic. And in the game that I played, I tucked 2 of my 4 stormtrooper squads away. So I basically wound up deploying with Vader and ATST and 2 squads of stormtroopers. And I didn't have a problem. I really didn't. There was, you know, you utilize cover, you do what you need to do, and then at the end of turn 3, or at the end of turn 2 rather, so into turn 3, now you've got these other 2 stormtrooper units that are dropping in exactly where you need them to be. And that's what helped me win the game. One of them dropped right on top of an objective and just sat there for the next 3 turns and provided cover fire. And most of the time, all it was shooting was the DTL at range 4. But hey, 2 red dice with rerolls, I'll take it. That's good enough when the ATST's in the thick of things, right? So everything works really well together to get you the results you want. What my next point of interest will be is to try an 800-point game against another Imperial player and see what that's like. ATST versus ATST, I would imagine, but we'll see what happens. So thanks for sticking around and hearing me rant about terrain and line of sight and cover and my experience playing the Imperials and playing on a 3x3 at lower points and 6x3 at higher points. I still love this game. I still think it's awesome. It does have that one little rules hiccup and maybe a couple other things here and there, but by and large it's still one of the smoothest, cleanest rule sets I've played for a war game, and I have yet to play with someone who basically said, no, this isn't for me. And if you do, that's fine. Respect to you. You don't have to like every single game you play, but I just mean that from the perspective of do I enjoy this game? Do I have fun playing this game? I haven't had a single person not come away with a smile on their face. So I guess the next time I probably do a Legion video, unless I kind of think of something specific, will probably be a little bit of a recap of the tournament that happens in 2 days from now, and we'll see how that goes, and I will sure to give you the upgrade. One other thing I wanted to say, too, actually, this is a little bit of a sidebar. I think I brought it up once in the Star Wars Legion Facebook group, like the global one. I would love to get some of those really pretty acrylic tokens for myself to play with, and maybe even for my gaming group. And here's the problem I'm encountering, is that the tokens are beautiful and that the prices are reasonable, but that shipping is a killer. It'll be like, hey, here's $40 to $50 for your tokens. Okay, great. They look amazing, and they're well worth the purchase because I like this game so much. And then it'll be like, oh, by the way, though, $21 for shipping because it's coming from the States and I'm in North Bay, Ontario, Canada. And I'm just like, well, you just added an extra third of what I'm paying right back onto the price. I don't know that I can justify that. So I'm officially putting a call out to anyone who knows of anyone or who is someone who is in the province of Ontario or hell, the country of Canada, who creates and sells these beautiful acrylic tokens. And I'm talking all kinds of tokens, order tokens, wound tokens, aim, suppression, whatever. I want all of it. I want all of it. And I mean, plus, I wish there was someone who did it local. I like to support local where possible, but I don't think that that's going to realistically be the case. So the next best thing is just to try and figure out a way to get around that really horrendous shipping, because I think you get free shipping from what I was seeing. I was looking at Rebel Lightworks on Etsy, and they were selling like if you did $220 of purchasing, then shipping is free. It's like, okay, well, that means I have to persuade every person almost that I play with to buy something from you, and it'll probably be somewhere in the area of $30 to $40 each at least, and then that's on top of the expense that they just had to get into the game. So that one's not working out too well, but we'll see what happens. So yeah, if you know someone, if you are someone, leave a comment in the comments of this video, or in the Facebook group. My name's Anthony Campagato. Feel free to tag me in it. Either way, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.